What do you think of when you hear the word prophet? Some people might draw up within their minds an image of someone who foretells the future. The prophet prophesies. She or he foretells or predicts the future. We might think of John the Baptist as a prophet when he preached in the wilderness, foretelling the coming of the Messiah. I baptize you with water for repentance, but one who is more powerful than I is coming after me. I am not worthy to carry his sandals. Some people imagine a prophet to be full of fire and brimstone, convicting the audience of its sins. There are certainly lots of examples of that, especially within the Old Testament, of this sort of prophet. Micah was one. The Lord is coming out and will come down and tread upon the high places of the earth. Then the mountains will melt under God, and the valleys will burst open like wax near the fire, like waters poured down a steep place. All this for the transgression of Jacob and for the sins of the house of Israel. But there is another kind of prophet. Someone who takes a role beyond that of the soothsayer or the fire and brimstone preacher. And that sort of prophet is a poet. A poet who evokes within the audience a sense of pride and determination and hope. Most of all, a sense of hope. Someone who points to the future as something we can anticipate with joy and expectancy rather than fear and dread. Someone who reminds the people that God is a loving and gracious God. Someone who points to a new day on the horizon. It's that sort of prophet who is responsible for this morning's text found in Isaiah, chapter 43, verses 16 through 21. In fact, many scholars think that the prophet who wrote this morning's text was an entirely different person than the one responsible for the first part of the book of Isaiah, chapters 1 through 39. There is so much evidence to support this idea that they even refer to them as 1st Isaiah and 2nd Isaiah. Whereas 1st Isaiah seems to be written by someone who warned the people with words of judgment before their exile into Babylon, 2nd Isaiah seems to be written to comfort them in their years after the exile. In his book, The Land, by Walter Brueggemann, he wrote, "The exiled Jews were not oppressed, abused, or imprisoned, but they were displaced, alienated from the place that gave them identity and security. And when you're separated from your own people, you begin to believe the strange lies that your captors tell you." In the late 1950s, psychologist Robert J. Lifton studied former prisoners of Korean War and Chinese war camps. And he determined that they had undergone a multi-step process that began with attacks on the prisoners' sense of self-identity. And it ended with what appeared to be a change in beliefs. The end result was what we now call brainwashing. Each stage of the brainwashing technique takes place in isolation. And the stages involve a breaking down of one's sense of self-identity, convincing the victim that she or he is bad and guilty, and then offering a sense of hope and salvation by adopting the values of the captor. Although the Israelites didn't suffer from physical abuse or imprisonment while they were in the land of Babylon, they suffered a psychological and spiritual abuse that ate away at their identities and even their souls. The people thought they had brought this calamity upon themselves by their faithlessness, and they forgot about God's role throughout their long history. It must have been very hard for them. It must have been hard not to get too comfortable with Babylon ways, Babylon beliefs, Babylon values. It must have been hard to resist the temptation to settle down, fit in, sell out, and forget the story that had held them together. And so into that heartache and doubt stepped a poet-prophet to sing a new song about ancient things and about the new thing that the God of old was about to do. When things seemed to be the worst they had ever been, God sent this prophet to sing a new song that would lift the spirits, expand the imagination, solidify the hope of the people. Thus says God, who makes a way in the sea, a path in the mighty waters. Do not remember the former things or consider the things of old. I'm about to do a new thing. Now it springs forth. Do you not perceive it? I will make a way in the wilderness and rivers in the desert. For I give water in the wilderness, rivers in the desert. I give drink to my chosen people, the people whom I formed for myself, so that they might declare my praise. This is just the sort of medicine that the people of Israel would have needed. This poet who reminded them of their history and the God who had delivered them from slavery and lifted them up to be a light unto the nations. This poet who offered up hope as if it were a cool drink of water in the heat of the desert. This poet prophet sent from God to reconstruct their sense of national pride and to rebuild their trust and faith in God who is merciful and gracious.